discussion on two of the themes of STEEP. A report based on this discussion will be compiled as suggestion and submitted to the DST for their consideration. The first panel discussion is on open science, which is happening now, which is also happens to be the first chapter of the policy draft. The current discussions around the draft lay a greater emphasis on the much discussed open access and one nation one subscription issues. We have seen a lot of article on these two already in newspaper. But we hope to articulate a clearer vision on larger aspects of open science through this panel discussion. To steer this discussion, we are privileged to have our esteemed panelists with us today. So I will introduce our panelist. So joining us today, our first panelist is Dr. Rajesh Tandon. Dr. Tandon is founder president of Participatory Research in Asia, Global Center for Participatory Research and Training since 1982. He is also co-chair of the UNESCO Chair on Community-Based Research and Social Responsibility in Higher Education since 2012. Dr. Tandon has served on numerous expert committees of Government of India, UGC, UN, Commonwealth, and World Bank. Currently, Dr. Tandon also heads the Forum for Indian Development Cooperation as its chairperson, which is a tripartite initiative of development partnership administration of the Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, academia, and civil society organizations. Also joining us today is our second panelist, Professor Sudeshna Sharkar from Computer Science Department, IIT Kharagpur. She is also the head of the Center for Excellence in Artificial Intelligence at IIT Kharagpur. Her academic interest and work includes AI, ML, text and data mining, and natural language processing. Professor Sarkar was also a member of the thematic group discussion on access to knowledge and resources of the STEEP policy formulation process. We also have a panelist for this session, Professor Amitabh Joshi from JNCS, Bangalore. He is a Bhatnagar awardee and a J.C. Bose National Fellow. He is fellow of all the three National Science Academies and a founding member and fellow of the Indian Society of Evolutionary Biologists. He is currently also the editor of publication at the Indian Academy of Sciences. I welcome all our panelists as well as our guest for this today's session. Before we start this session, I would like to mention that we are recording this event and the recording will be made available online. I would also request the audience to keep themselves muted and keep the videos turned off during the session. Also, we will take up questions from all the panelists at the end of the panel discussion. So our panelists will first present their views. And now without any further ado, I would like to begin the session. First, I would like to invite Dr. Tandon to present his view. Dr. Tandon, you may start. And Shuryas, please share Dr. Tandon's slides.
Sure, I'm doing.
First of all, thank you very much, Dr. Momita, and thank you, colleagues in the very important center based at IISc. This is a wonderful opportunity for us to discuss how to strengthen our fifth national STI policy that the Government of India has released in a draft form. As you are aware, this policy announcement is also happening at a time when UNESCO began to discuss and propose a formulation on open science. Today's session that I am participating in on open science, therefore, can draw what more is happening in the world through UNESCO. UNESCO's open science recommendation draft is already available with each member state, and this draft will be discussed by governments and is expected to be finalized in the Global Conference of UNESCO later around November this year. So my broad sort of overall suggestion is that we draw on what UNESCO's open science recommendation is saying. During the month of September to December, and more recently mid-January also, UNESCO and our UNESCO chair convened 11 regional and international webinars on open science. And we especially had a webinar on indigenous knowledge. So these conversations are available on our UNESCO Chair website, but I am drawing some of the key lessons from that for sharing with you this afternoon. So, Dr. Namdev, can you move the slide? Then I can start with the first slide.
Shurius, the slides, please somehow.
Okay, can you see the slides? No?
No, no.
Okay, 1 second.
Not yet. Yeah.
Can
It
you
was
see now?
visible in the very beginning. That's it. I can see it.
Correct.
I hope others can see it too.
Yes, we all can
Okay.
see it now.
So let me start, because the section of the policy is a wonderful comprehensive statement. So what it contains in open science is only a small part, and we are discussing that chapter today. It has various subheadings. Most of the time, open science is assumed to be equivalent to open data and open access. Let me talk a little bit about open data. It is important to recognize that open data and open access are not modern contemporary concepts. Till about 1908, all academic publications were open license. The privatization and commercialization of this knowledge economy is only a recent phenomenon. If we go back to Indian history and Indian knowledge systems, which I'll return to, knowledge was also seen as a public good and not for private gain. So I think the policy statement there on open data for all publicly funded research is very welcome. It needs to be reinforced. And as it says that many a times it is not public funding of research, but publicly funded infrastructure of research, which is utilized. So I think this is a very comprehensive statement. It should be operationalized. But I think one has to be careful about this open data business, because it tends to hide pay to publish, because industry tends to ask, even in open access systems. I recently had an experience. I had to write a review of an article. I was invited to write a review by a journal. And when I sent the review, the journal said, I have to pay 1,000 rupees for my review to be published. So this kind of pay to publish wall that is included in open data, I think one has to be explicitly stating that this is not acceptable. The policy also includes FAIR. FAIR is a concept which has gained international acceptance lately, and it is not yet established as a UNESCO standard. It is developed by the largest publishing house called Elsevier. And what is important to remember is that by virtue of being an Elsevier platform, Elsevier will have access to data and in a way will exercise control over governance of data. And it could produce new analytics arising out of that access to data and market it commercially. So one has to be sensitive to the downside of any of these unless they are designed and produced by our own scientists in our own country. Next slide, please. The second issue is open access. And typically open access is open access to academics, open access to research scientists who are in formal research institutions. And the policy statement is clear. It provides researchers in academic institutions open access. But there are other actors in society who may also benefit from such research. And they are not sitting in academic institutions. They are not sitting. There are a whole number of independent research institutions, NGO research institutions, parastatal research institutions. They are policymakers actually who don't have access to these journals because they are not sitting in research institutions. So how do practitioners, policymakers, service delivery workers who can also benefit from having access to research findings, how do they get benefit? Open access is not just open access to academics and researchers in formal research institutions. There has been a debate about this one nation, one subscription, and this is being discussed and it is mentioned in the document. But please remember that this concept also is based on what many academics are beginning to analyze as platform profiteering. It is profiteering, making money out of a common platform that is developed. And in May 2020, during the pandemic, many national level research institutions joined together in the Netherlands to subscribe to this, and already some evidence is coming from independent researchers, because what it does is it packages everything in one place and it reduces flexibility. So it is important to examine what potentially could be the downside. I think open access should be really open access, and it should be based on the principle that is enshrined in the policy draft already. Next slide, please. But open science is a bit more than open data and open access. And I think it is this part of the policy draft that I want to focus on, and I hope it can be strengthened through some of my observations as well as many from others. I think Indian knowledge today is recognized to be relevant for global access as well. And therefore, strengthening Indian journals and digital knowledge platforms should be viewed from a global access perspective. Global access for southern countries, global access through the South-South Cooperation Framework and Ministry of External Affairs, where I serve on this Forum for India Development Cooperation, has been strengthening its own South-South cooperation mechanism. And I think Indian science, Indian knowledge, Indian knowledge research should be in some clear way made accessible to other southern societies and under the framework of South-South cooperation. There is a larger problem which the open science perspective needs to keep in mind, that the problem with international publication industry is that it is linking ranking of journals with ranking of academic institutions. And various kinds of science index, citation index that have been produced, they are quintessentially controlled by international publication industry based in Europe or North America. So many individual researchers of necessity get tempted to publish in those and may not want to publish in Indian journals. So one of the big questions is, how do we incentivize researchers to publish in Indian journals and Indian digital knowledge sharing platforms? There are already examples from other countries and we can learn from them. There are examples from southern publishing models in Brazil, in South Africa. The Latin American academic associations have a platform of their own. Cordesarea, which is a Pan-African scientific platform, as its own. So India being one of the largest, perhaps the third or second largest scientific enterprise in the world today, it should have its own platform which it can make available to other developing countries in a South-South cooperation perspective. That will promote Indian knowledge, but in addition, it will promote India's way of making open access and science being open science. Next slide, please. There is a question about what science is open to only scientific researchers, scientific bodies, fellow scientists. That is important, but science needs to be open to society as well. I read very carefully the vision statement, the broad vision statement and its objectives in the draft science policy, STI policy, but I did not find its link to society explicitly stated. It has links to science, but not links to outward society. I think open science chapter of our policy should be including science being open to society. Now, within the UNESCO's recommendation on open science, which are already in place, there are several agreed statements which I have put here in quotes, and I explain to you. The first one says design models that allow co-production of knowledge with heterogeneous societal actors. What it means is that co-production of knowledge could happen in partnership with formal scientific institutions and other societal actors. We only recognize this with industry, but don't recognize with other civil society organizations, other independent research institutes. And under the policy of DST, there has been a long tradition of supporting partnership-based research, even though it may not have found place as yet in this draft. Around the world, citizen and participatory science is already recognized as a legitimate and an integral part of scientific enterprise. Even in this country, with a long tradition of people's science movement, the long tradition of promoting scientific temper, citizen and participatory science continues to be an important ingredient, and it should find place in the draft chapter on open science. Last point here is what UNESCO recommendation says, epistemic pluralism of diverse research communities, scholars, knowledge holders, and social actors. But this epistemic pluralism, pardon my saying so, requires scientific enterprise outside English language. If bulk of our scientific enterprise is going to be carried out in English language, it will not support epistemic pluralism. Multilingualism, respect for other languages as vehicles for knowledge production is an important part of acknowledging open science. And I return to this in my last slide when it comes to open science, when it is open to indigenous knowledge systems. We live in a country which is today promoting indigenous knowledge. Even during the pandemic, indigenous knowledge systems, indigenous solutions, indigenous healthcare approaches have been promoted, acknowledged worldwide. We have our own institutions in this country, ministries and government-funded research institutions, which are looking at organic agriculture, which is indigenous knowledge system. They're looking at water harvesting. The Ministry of Jal is actually inviting traditional water harvesting knowledge systems to contribute to making water available to all Indian citizens. We have Indian system of health, and there is a Ayush ministry, and there are other parallel ministries of Government of India which are resourcing, funding, supporting these indigenous knowledge systems. And I think it is important that DST's document is a document of Indian nation, Indian society, Indian government, and not just DST. Therefore, reference to these, you would be happy to know that in our work, we have been producing policy notes on open science. We came across a very interesting book which has been only recently published in English. It's called Jewel of Reflection on the Truth, a bit about epistemology. And it's been written by a 12th century Sanskrit scholar called Gangesha Upadhyay. 12th century conversation in India talked about respect for indigenous knowledge systems. And therefore, I think in the open science chapter of the new policy, acknowledgement of openness to indigenous knowledge, openness to excluded knowledges should be made and incentivized such that a co-production and a synchronous, synergistic approach could be adopted without saying one is superior to other or one is only voodoo science. Indigenous communities around the world are claiming a collective ownership of their own knowledge. And this is what I think open science chapter in this policy of Government of India should also acknowledge that indigenous knowledge is not privately owned but is collectively governed. Almost the concept of knowledge commons, which has been around in discourse and debate for several decades already. I hope these suggestions I have made are helpful. I am happy to respond and provide comments and answers or even write longer notes. But I do hope all of you will encourage a more broader and more inclusive and more Indian definition of open science than is currently included. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Tandon, for sharing your views. I would just like to mention that actually there are later chapter in the research, all this acknowledgement towards the traditional Indian knowledge and Indian knowledge system has been there, and how to connect those systems to the modern scientific endeavor has also been recommended. So it has not really been included in the open science chapter, but it's been elaborated in other chapters. But then definitely we will try to put a view there that so that the open science chapter also does not look so much disconnected from those portion of the policy. So definitely we kept it noted down. And also would like to mention that the multilingualism theme also has been acknowledged in this draft in the later stage. But yeah, but this is important as well that we agree.
I've read the policy several times. I'm aware of that. I didn't want to talk about other chapters because we are focusing on the first chapter. And it's the first chapter, it should set the tone, and it can draw inspiration as well as support from UNESCO's, because that debate is happening right now, and Government of India will be signing that document in November. So its own policy can resonate that debate.
Yeah, sure. We will take care of that. Thanks a lot. So, as I have mentioned before as well, that we will take the question and answer at the end of the sessions after all our panelists express their views. So now I would like to move to our next panelist. So I invite Professor Sudeshna Sharkar to share her views. Professor Sharkar, please take the floor now.
Thank you, Momita. That was an excellent talk by Dr. Tandon. So I will talk briefly about my views on what are some of the enablers of open science in India. And I agree with most of the things that Dr. Tandon has talked about. I believe that science and engineering, we should focus on how science and engineering can serve society and humanity. And the policy should focus on that. So there's this quotation from Louis Pasteur: knowledge belongs to humanity, and therefore we should make sure that knowledge is free. So as all of you are aware of, open science aims to make scientific and engineering research free, so that scientific discovery can be reinforced and made progressive and reused, because research, data, and dissemination can be made accessible to everyone, not just scientists, but to all levels of an inquiring society. So there has to be transparency of research and replicability. It should maximize public benefit, accelerate scientific discovery, and it should help answer uniquely complex questions. If the data and findings and methodology by scientists belonging to one domain or one group is shared with others, it will enable also scientists from other disciplines to make use of those results, and for these people to come together, and it will foster interdisciplinary research, which is so useful to solve the most important problems in the world. And most importantly, it will act as an enabler for anyone to do research, even people outside these academic or scientific institutions, and to reap the benefits of science. So that there is a broader, faster, and equal access for the benefit of not just researchers, but also innovators, for startups and industry, and for citizens who want to do science or use the benefits of science. So this is a slide I took from someplace, which shows that what are the incentives for researchers to make their findings public. So making one's own publications public and also having access to others' publications, the benefits are immense. It enhances visibility and impact of the research. It helps to accelerate the publication process and allow others to reinforce and build upon your work. And as this group is well aware, there are several standards of open access. There is this green open access where researchers archive their own work, which is not that hasn't got that's easiest to do, but still hasn't got that much of traction yet. And there is this gold open access, which means publishing in an open access journal. And there's this hybrid mode where one can pay article processing charges to open an article in a subscription journal. Now, the shortcomings of the current open access model is that green open access, it hasn't become ubiquitous. And for gold open access, the APC model actually shifts the costs. So while making the access to knowledge free to everyone from all institutions, from all walks of life, it shifts the burden to a smaller number of individuals or to a smaller number of institutions which are doing research. In that way, there is some unfairness built into this model. So while it increases and also because this article processing charges can be very large, especially for people from countries like India, while it enables researchers from poorly funded institutions to get access to scientific literature, but their ability to be able to strive for publishing in high quality journals is also diminished. The burden of financing has to be shifted away from the researchers. And we have to find a way so that individuals do not have to pay these charges while simultaneously making sure that the scientific work is accessible to everyone. So one of the aspects that Dr. Tandon talked about and is very appropriate is to develop and have high quality Indian journals in science that are well regarded internationally. And the reasons are manifold. Firstly, it can reduce the cost of access to knowledge. And more importantly, it can increase the scientific capital of the nation. India being a country which has the third highest volume of scientific contributions, I think it is necessary that there should be high quality journals which are published from India. However, there are certain challenges of having high quality journals. To have a good quality journal in that domain, there must be a good volume of quality research in the discipline in the country. There has to be, very, good review and publication process. And also, it is very important that we ourselves recognize the publication made to Indian journals. So today, publication in Indian journals or conferences are not usually looked up as high quality publication by researchers from India. But today, we have reached a level where it is much easier to produce high quality journals and much easier and much less expensive. The technical component is much easier today because there is this open publishing infrastructures, that is the softwares and platforms which can enable open publication. They are being developed and it is not difficult to develop them. So which takes care of the submission and review system. There are technologies that can keep track of ownership and plagiarism and attributions and such other things. In most disciplines, the authors themselves do high quality editing because of good software support for editing and publication.
Just, Professor Sarkar, just I will interrupt. I think the sharing of the presentation got stopped.
Okay,
Momita,
it went
I think,
into.
someone named Srinivasulu has shared the screen. He
Yeah,
has
okay.
to share and then Professor Sarkar
Okay.
can share. Yeah,
Yeah,
now it's
thanks. Yeah, okay. Yeah, thanks. Sir.
Is it being shared?
Now we are back on. Yeah, we
Yeah.
are back on your slides, Professor Sarkar.
Okay, so I can resume from here, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, so what I was saying is that today it is much easier to produce high quality journals because of software platforms and tools and technology which is available today. The author can do high quality editing, and dissemination is much easier because hard copy journals are not required. Most of the dissemination is happening online. So the costs have come down drastically. And the second component is the intellectual component. There is a lot of positive outlook on that front today. There's a greater thrust on quality research and good funding by government towards research. So if we have to have a path or a roadmap to get high quality journals, we must put our heads together. There must be increased quality of research output. There must be collaboration with and recognition by the international scientific community of the research being done in India. Already there is a lot of recognition for research, but the profession of research should attract more talented people and students. In India, the industry academia collaboration is not developed to the extent as it is done in various developed countries. So this has to be improved. Academies and institutions must back the setting up of high quality journals, and they must pledge to publish themselves and recognize publication and partake in the review process of Indian journals so as to improve their quality. They should have an enabling framework so that they can attract high quality research from international researchers through attractive policies, pricing, practices of open data and other such policies. Then in those domains where conference publication, like in computer science or AI, where conference publication is most highly regarded, and there are certain, well-regarded conferences which are already there. Introduction of journal track, which can be converted to journal articles, can be looked into. And finally, mentoring of scientific research by accomplished researchers so that students and faculty from less endowed institutions can get into this domain of scientific publication. So those are extremely important to have high quality journals. The next thing that in order to take the research forward, it is not only the research paper, but also in a lot of disciplines, the research data that is obtained, if that data is made accessible to everyone, then it can help people to build upon the research. So not just research data, but lab notebooks, research methodology, software and code. So those can be shared so that it can reinforce open scientific inquiry. Now, science is based on building upon and reusing and critiquing prior scientific knowledge and findings. So while it takes a lot of effort and a lot of thought and a lot of analytical power to develop research data, today, because of the digital world, it is very easy and inexpensive to share research data so that researchers from anywhere in the world And even researchers who have very limited resources to investigate scientific questions, they can use this data to investigate scientific questions. And making this data available in the open, it encourages diversity of studies and opinion. And the data can be used for new areas of work and for new solutions not envisaged by the original researcher. So access to the data thus increases the returns from public investment. So therefore, sharing of research data is essential for science to progress efficiently and for society to reap the benefits from scientific endeavors. And there are numerous examples where the sharing of scientific data has led to great scientific progress. For example, in the Human Genome Project, in the domain of climate and weather studies, where the different geospatial data are being shared. Then during the COVID pandemic, a lot of institutions and countries and hospitals, they shared a large amount of data about the numbers, the radiological findings, medical findings of the different patients that led to scientists across the world using the data and helping to progress the science. And there are numerous examples in the domains, many disciplines like natural language processing, computer vision, artificial intelligence, biology, and several such domains. Dr. Tandon already talked about the FAIR principles of so that the data is in a format so that sometimes data can be just given as supplementaries to a particular journal article. So that data is of limited use. So it is better to have repositories where data is properly indexed, there is proper assigned metadata, and data can be reused in an easy way. So data, the metadata, the details of the information should be fully and openly shared and shared in discipline-specific repositories. They should be available quickly. And ontology and metadata for discipline is extremely important. Data must be interoperable so that it can work in different formats. Where necessary, the data must be anonymized. And for sensitive data, some access control can be there. But the majority of data should be shareable. And in order to make researchers share data, there must be encouragement in policy. So there must be, while scientific publications get a lot of merit, there should be incentive for creation of good quality data. So the creation of data should be recognized as scientific contribution. The quality of the data must be mandated. So one must get credit, scientists must get credit for creating and sharing data in their promotions, in their assessments. And this can also come from having a policy of data citation or co-authorship so that scientists are encouraged to publish their data. Scientific repositories containing data, resources, papers, reports should be maintained not only because one can search for the data or the publications that one desires, but so that the repository of scientific work can be mined using different tools of text and data mining so that that knowledge can be aggregated and new discoveries can be made. Thirdly, it is very important to have equitable access to knowledge by all sections of society. So at the first level, the access to scientific knowledge are to scientists of the same discipline in other institutions. But also, scientific research results can be used from scientists of other disciplines so that it can foster interdisciplinary research. Also, people outside research institutions and academia who want to do science should be encouraged to do so. And very importantly, common people whose life and livelihood may be potentially affected by scientific advancement, they should have access to the knowledge of scientific discovery. So for this, so that scientists from other disciplines can reap the benefit of scientific knowledge, there should be effective means of science communication. And this sort of science communication should be made through articles so that scientists from different disciplines can come together and work on problems requiring interdisciplinarity. Also, people from outside institutions in academia, including school students, including other people working in industry, or people from different walks of life who want to do science but are not in a scientific establishment, can do science themselves. And one of the enablers for this is to have different hackathons or challenge tasks where certain problems of interest are defined and data and resources are made available so that anyone can work on those problems. And thirdly, the access to scientific discoveries by all, by common people. So when scientific, the topics of science are decided, when a researcher chooses the topic of interest, that topic should look at the interests of the unique problems of the country. So there was a tradition that people used to work on problems of the developed countries. Today there is more recognition of looking at problems of different economies, of the unique situations in our country, and also the scientists should be aware of looking at problems. Scientists and technologists should look at problems which affect different sections of the society. And in order to be able to do that, we have to make the common person the stakeholder to scientific work, to the purpose of the type of science that is going on, the type of products that will benefit them. And in order to do this effectively, it is very important to have a good channel of science communication, so that the lay person who is not a scientist, doesn't have a science background, but whether that person is a farmer or a teacher or a health worker, they should be able to define the type of tasks which can be improved through science, so that they can deliver efficiently and more effectively. So it is very important to take everyone along while doing science, and for this, scientific communication and also multilingual communication at the level of different people, this is extremely important. So I will stop by saying that let us promote science without boundaries so that we can accelerate scientific progress and impact and have equitable access for all. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Professor Sarkar. So as interest of time, I will quickly move to Professor Joshi. Professor Joshi, it's over to you.
Thank you. While I wait for the slides to come on, let me just say that I would like to thank the organizers for giving me a chance to share my views in such an important and interesting forum. I will also say at the outset that I largely agree with almost everything that has been said so far. So I will try to be brief and maybe expound upon only a few topics where I may perhaps complement what has already been said. So these are the various topics on your screen in the Open Science chapter. And one thing I would just like to say before I start is the views I am expressing are entirely personal. They don't necessarily represent the institutional views of either Jawaharlal Nehru Center or the Indian Academy of Sciences. So before we start, I would like to make one general comment about open science beyond what has already been said. And that is that we should not lose sight of the point that science is not a collection of facts, it's a process and a way of thinking and a way of evaluating facts. So when we discuss open science, we tend to focus on access to scientific data, research facilities, educational materials, etc. We should also make sure that we include as a key goal of any open science policy the enabling of an appreciation of science as a way of evidence-based, rational and skeptical questioning and thinking by every citizen. Dr. Tandon already did mention this. So let me go back to the chapter and its topics. I will largely talk about these three highlighted topics: open access, one nation, one subscription, and Indian journals. And maybe if time permits, I will talk a little bit about open data, just to make one or two very brief points. So open access, in addition to everything that's been said, if as a nation we want to really invest in open access, we need non-trivial investment in the infrastructure and hardware and in staff. And this last point is important because scientists should not be expected to waste their time uploading stuff to repositories. They already put in the effort to do their work to begin with. And this is something which is very crucial. In addition to central institutional repositories envisaged in the document, placing on standard preprint servers, for example, archive or bioarchive, should be acceptable. As a temporary patch, we might want to consider negotiating one nation, one open access fee type of deals, where the fee could be paid for the whole nation by Government of India, and that would allow our scientists to publish a certain number of open access articles in journals of these major publishers. This could also be negotiated along with other BRICS nations or Global South nations to at least get better article processing charges or APCs for Indian scientists. But I stress that this is in the nature of a temporary patch, and I'll say more about this. On one nation, one subscription and Indian journals and how to improve them, I actually have something to say. For the last 4 years, I've had the privilege of overseeing the production of the journals of the Indian Academy of Sciences, which by most reckonings would be among the highest quality science journals produced from India. So the first point I would like to make is that one nation, one subscription, again, is only a temporary patch on a deeper problem. It is not a long-term solution. The same would be true for any similar open access agreements one might negotiate as a government with the publishers. A lasting solution has to go deeper, and we need to address the problem. The problem has already been talked about by both the preceding speakers. The problem is the publishing industry and how it has evolved. At present, the publishing industry is extremely profitable, almost obscenely so, and exploitative of the scientists and the funding agencies, which are typically the governments. And this state of affairs really cannot continue. The blame for this state of affairs, as also the solution to this problem, lies with us as the scientific community. So at present, in scientific publishing, there are really all said and done two models. One model is the reader pays for the privilege of reading the article, and it is free for the author, though not always entirely free. What this really means is that basically the government pays through institutional subscriptions to these journals brought out by big publishers. The second model, which is increasingly becoming more common, is that the author pays for the privilege of publishing their work, and the work is free for readers to read. Always free, maybe sometimes with a time delay. The preceding speaker talked about gold versus green open access and so on. Again, here basically what the model implies is that the government pays through institutional support for paying the article processing charges. So in both of these models, the equation is that the government pays, the authors and readers benefit to varying degrees, and the publisher profits. Now, in principle, there is a third option. The third option would be that the government pays, authors and readers benefit fully, and no commercial entity makes profits on the entire process. So the question is, how do we make this alternative viable? Now, this model already exists and is functioning, albeit in non-optimal form, as exemplified, for example, by the Indian Academy of Sciences journals. There is no charge to either the author or the reader. The government, in the form of the DST, subsidizes the production costs effectively. Now, these journals, although they are among the best quality science journals produced from India, face two kinds of problems or limitations. A, it is difficult to raise the content quality beyond a certain level due to perception issues. I'll talk about this. B, it is difficult to raise the processing, production efficiency and ease of use by editors beyond a certain level due to funding and administrative limitations. So let me just say a little bit more about these two. The perception issue arises, and again, this has been mentioned already. There is a perceived quality hierarchy of journals, and publications in India or other perceived to be less impactful journals are not valued by committees when looking at job applications or nominations for awards and recognitions. Basically, the problem is that as scientists, we have abdicated our responsibility to evaluate the science. We need to focus on the science and evaluate the science, not take the shortcut of saying, oh, the paper is published in Nature, so it must be good. Unfortunately, quite a lot of garbage does get published in even the top journals as long as it is on a fashionable topic. There has to be a very strong push from the science admin, I mean the Principal Scientific Advisor's Office, the DST, the DBT, CSIR, UGC, the academies, etc., to reverse this perception problem. The academies actually over the last few years have been pushing to emphasize that we need to judge the science. Now, unless we do this, that is, unless we focus on evaluating the science and not the journal where it's published, papers in top journals will remain coveted by scientists, and as long as that remains, publishers will take advantage of that. It is naive to imagine that if you hand profits on a platter to publishers because we want that paper in Science or Nature or Cell, publishers will take advantage of that and science will suffer. The financial administrative problem is that in order to speed up pre and post acceptance processing of articles, in order to be very competitive internationally, what we need to do is to facilitate flexible and local decision making by the people running those journals, including on finances, at least up to some limit. It is very difficult if every financial decision has to be cleared by DST or the finance ministry. In fact, one could arguably make the case that one of the biggest factors holding back Indian science from achieving its true potential, whether in research or in publications, is the directives of the Finance Ministry of India. Second, we need to invest, and I believe the government should invest in creating for all the good Indian journals a common world-class editorial management and typesetting system for online processing and publishing. If we wish to outsource these services, right now they are extremely expensive. And this would be a huge boost to being able to improve the quality of our journals even more and make them truly internationally competitive. For the longer term, as I said, there are some patches like One Nation, One Subscription and all. I view them as short-term patches. For the longer term, the government should consider serious investment in promoting quality journals in the free-to-author and free-to-reader mode by, number one, supporting and building up existing good Indian journals. I've already talked a little bit about this and others have too. Secondly, we should consider maybe investing in establishing good journals internationally together with our counterpart nations in the BRICS or the Global South in general. And we really need to change the mindset to evaluate the science and the promise of the scientists, not how many papers were published and the journals where the work appeared. Finally, let me just make 2 quick points about open data. This is where I slightly disagree with the optimism, not with the details of what they said, but with the optimism of the previous 2 speakers. Open data is a concept that sounds really nice. It's very tricky in implementation, and there are certain problems that we need to really be careful about. One is that storage capacity, curating manpower is a very huge issue here that needs to be thought through. Recently, the India archive for putting up preprints was started. It has already stopped accepting new articles because it appears that they have run out of storage space. Second point, which I think does not get enough attention, unfortunately, is that scientists who produce the data need to be seriously protected against parasitic meta-analysis experts. This breed of parasitic meta-analysis scientists is proliferating almost as rapidly as the predatory journals are, although the predatory journals are talked about more. And I think we also need to seriously figure out ways to clamp down on predatory journals operating out of India. I will stop here and I'll be happy to elaborate if there are specific questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Joshi. That was really very insightful, and we really got new points to think about. In the interest of time, I would just we should now move toward the question and answer session. So I will invite my colleague, Dr. Shurius, to take it forward from here. Shurius, over to you.
Thank you very much, Momita, and thanks again to all our panelists for their insights. I now open the floor for discussion. Please use the hand raise signal located at the top of the panel to ask your question. Also, please be brief. In the interest of time, I will call out your name, and while you are asking your question, you can turn on your video and introduce yourself first, please. Again, very briefly. Please also mention who your question is directed towards. And if anyone wants to use the chat box to type their question, they are also welcome to do so. I will read them out. We will also have just a reminder, we will also have a quick photo session at the end. So I think we can already start the session now. I see a hand raise from Sridhar Gautam. Yes, please go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, I'm Sridhar from Bangalore, IHR. This is for the Joshi's comment that India archive stopped. It's not because of the storage space, but we couldn't raise the funds for it. So I'm involved in that India archive preprint repository. So we were talking to many people, but we couldn't get that support. Okay, and then it is for general, and all the speakers were in for or for the open science, but unfortunately STIP has only has talked very less for the open science. I agree with the Tandon sir that we should delineate the publishers metrics, and I was also listening to the other two speakers that we should have, they were saying about the softwares and everything, and Joshi sir was saying that we should have a system. They are already all in place, but unfortunately it is not, we are not aware, and we don't have people who has the more capacity building on that. Like the OJS, Open Journal System, is the best robust software, but how many are using in India? Though, but Bangalore IISc was the first person to bring it into the training, and the last time on this platform itself, there was a discussion on the Amelika XML software, which can be used to make enriched formats. So things are available, but only as all our speakers, it's a comment actually, it's not a question. So I'll be a little brief. Next, please allow me. And all are agreeing towards this open science, but as Joshi sir was also saying that it is we are all responsible for it, not to go to, going beyond the publication, because the metrics which are there, the databases which are there by the publishers, were all taking us into their clutches, and we are all entangled to those things. So that needs to be delineated, and the science should be more open, using more open things. And STIP should have incorporated the DORA declaration, which was there in the DST's DBT open access policy. Unfortunately, that is missing. So these are my comments. Thank you.
Thanks.
I completely agree with everything Mr. Sridhar said.
So, all right, then we move to the next question. I think it's from Salini URS, I see. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Hello, good evening. I'm Shalini Aras. I have worked in the space of digital libraries and open access movement, because in fact I started the first electronic thesis and dissertation project called Vidyanidhi in India some 20 years back. So my question, actually not a question, I would say a supporting argument here is that I completely agree with Dr. Sridhar Gautam, because I heard people talking about the needed infrastructure, software, etc. As he said, it's already in place. In fact, 20 years back, I built a digital library with all the kinds of things that you're talking about with the then existing software. And today we have moved beyond all these softwares, beyond all this, meaning that were available 20 years back. Today we have robust, and then, you know, there are, I mean, many different examples of, I'm not going to name each and every software that is available. In fact, we are conducting a program, I mean, a conclave called the eScience and Digital Library Conclave, starting from January 27th. And there is one session on open science and scholarly publication, where we are going to discuss some of these, you know, infrastructure facilities that are available, European structures and various other structures that are available. So I just wanted to highlight that there is, we don't have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to the necessary infrastructure. That's it. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Could I very briefly